Welcome to PopNerdery, the show that is nerdier than trading superhero underoos with your brother, not only for preference, but also for the sake of the first few panels of your own comic book origin story. This is a place where you are allowed to have an opinion on anything in pop culture, but you gotta have more than just a little bit to say. In a normal episode, we pick out some of the headlines that have us talking that week, do a deep dive in kind of a bigger topic, and then give each other some recommendations, but none of that today. Once again, we got a review episode, and today is all about Batman versus Superman.
Question mark?
Exactly. Yeah, so if this is your first time joining us, welcome. I am your host, Brent, and with me, as always, is the Bruce to my Alfred, Dave. What's up, Dave?
Hey, buddy, feeling good for the time being. I will feel sad soon.
And the Clark Kent to my Jimmy, Toph. What's up, pal?
Well, I'd feel personally insulted by that, but we'll yell more about that later. Speaking about yelling and hollering, you had a couple different ways to interact with the show here. The first one is on the Twitters, at PopNerdery, PopNerdery. We comment on things as they happen. Emojis happen a bunch. Sometimes there's just sadness. This week there was sadness. But that's okay, because we're a community and we're here for one another. We're going to work through this. The second way to listen to the show is on the iTunes. Fire up that podcast section, go to the search box, type in PopNerdery, find us, rate us, review us, subscribe others, subscribe everybody. Do it. Third way is on the website, popnerdery.com. We archive all of our episodes there. We're in the comments, chit-chatting away, making friends and kissing babies. You probably shouldn't bring babies to our comment section. Don't do that. Do the other things I've mentioned.
Babies and internets are a bad combination.
Yeah, it's just, legally, our lawyers have reminded me I can't recommend you bring a baby to our comment section because that's a terrible idea. Final way to listen to the show, on our 3x5 index card, write down which one you think is the bigger crime, Batman versus Superman or Batman and Robin. Mail it to Dave Fultz. He'll select one at random and appear over your shoulder and just weep quietly. He won't do anything else. He'll just cry softly.
Yes. So, as you have probably already picked up here, listeners, we're talking about Batman versus Superman, and there's not a lot of positivity going on between the three of us right now, and we will get into that. So we are going to talk about the movie, talk about the one of the three of us that actually saw the movie in the theater, and why the other two have not taken ourselves to the theater to put ourselves through that. But Dave has given us a lot of information to chew on, and Toph and I have gone ahead and avoided any reason to feel bad about reading reviews or reading spoilers, and that's why this show is going to exist. We're going to talk about all that stuff, and we are going to have some fun in our misery together.
Nailed it. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure that we didn't have you wait for this review episode until the Blu-ray came out, and some of us saw it. I brought myself to the theater because you could tell me that Cat Williams was going to play Batman, and I would have gone because I have that sort of a sickness in my heart. So I had to go. I went with Pop Nerdery superfan Carl the Destroyer. We went and saw this movie on opening night, and I'll say this: the movie is pretty much unspoilable. That's another reason why we can talk about it as a group, even though you guys haven't seen it yet. If you saw the Doomsday trailer, or whatever they called that trailer, the first time you saw Doomsday, you pretty much saw this movie. There's not much that went on in this movie, especially good, not much good that went on in this movie that you didn't see in the trailers. So that's the first thing. It's kind of unspoilable. Overall impression, and I've said this to a couple of different people at this point, but overall, there was about 90 minutes of good, not great movie in here, but it was kind of buried inside of a 2.5-hour movie, and it's kind of buried under the Zack Snyder of it all. that's the hard part to digest, is that it really kind of doubled down on all the stuff that people didn't like about Man of Steel. There was a lot of kind of like grueling gray sadness that happened all across this whole movie.
All the darkness.
Right, which isn't.
It's dark.
God.
Right, and
because this is a dark movie and it's brooding.
it's serious.
It's not at all fun.
Yeah, they didn't have a guy in this movie who wears his underpants on the outside of his regular pants. That's for sure. And that's my biggest problem with it, is that the plot and pacing of it all was kind of rough. If you walked into this movie about halfway through, maybe after the first hour, you walked into this movie and you sat down, it was a great extended version of what we saw in the trailers. But the first hour of this movie was unfocused and not fun, and it kind of it had a lot of ideas but didn't want to flesh any of them out, I guess is the best way to say it. There were a lot of plot threads that started that they didn't really do the work of fleshing out before they came to fruition in this battle between the two of them. The battle was supposed to be the culmination of these stories, but they kind of half-assed their way to get there, is kind of the point. Positive things before we go on to full spoilers. The acting was actually pretty good. The script didn't help anyone, but overall I really liked Affleck as Batman. There were some characterizations that were outside of his control because they're characterizations that were in the script that I didn't particularly like about the character, but him in that role was good. I love Jeremy Irons as Alfred. He was a really great version of the Alfred that we see so often in the comics, where he is Penny One over the intercom, and he's helping actually accomplish things. Gal Gadot is great as Wonder Woman. I didn't hate Jesse Eisenberg as much as some other people did as Lex Luthor. So overall, I thought the acting was pretty good in this one.
So we're gonna have some questions for you. Hopefully, we can just throw them at you left and right. Since again, I have not seen this movie, and neither has Toph. Tell
Brett,
me.
I want to hold on. Wait, before we get to questions, I want to address exactly that point.
Okay.
Did you decide not to watch this, or did you just not get around to it quickly?
So I was assuming very early on in the origins of the PopNerdery Podcast that I might be the third person on this podcast to see this movie, just because I don't have the DC boner that you guys do. I certainly don't have the wealth of understanding of the character of Batman as much as you guys do either. But I've always liked the idea of Affleck as Batman more than I think the average Joe Schmo did. There was a lot of backlash that came out when Affleck was announced, but at the same time, because Man of Steel didn't really do it for me, and because I don't have the jitters, because this story has been waiting to be told in movie theaters for 15, 20 years. I've never been that amped about it. I realized a long time ago that I would wait till I heard it was great to go see it in the theaters.
Fair.
What about you?
I intentionally didn't see it. I didn't want it in my eyeballs.
Yeah.
I can't get excited when I'm in the middle of, Daredevil is out now. I'm watching that. I just got, Flash is coming back after a hiatus, and there are a lot of other things that I like in media. I didn't feel like I wanted to force myself through something, and especially when as an old man who, I got to get my walker, I got to find someone to carry me to the theater, I got to get there 2.5 hours early so I can piss 3 times. That was just an expenditure of time and effort that I definitely wasn't giving Zack Snyder again. It's like George Lucas now. You can only kick me down the stairs so many times before I'm I'm not fucking coming over there again. You come to me.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing about these Warner Brothers movies, and we're going to talk about like what's next, where do we go from here at the end of the spoiler section. But for me, it sounds like you actively made the choice. I'm not going to give Warner Brothers my money on this one.
They'll get it. They're just not getting theater money for it.
Gotcha. Okay. And I think the main thing is I almost wish that I had made that decision, that I had the strength to do it. But as you guys could see, the critical reaction to this thing was terrible all week. Yeah. There were very few positive reviews of this movie all week, and I think that the movie earned all of the bad press that it got, for sure. I don't think it was one of those movies that got shit on more than it deserved. I would say that the movie was about 10 to 20% better than the worst, most scathing, shitty reviews, which doesn't make it good. It just means that maybe there were a couple people that were out for blood.
Yeah, I think you have to take any review of a comic book movie as those reviewers are also reviewing art films, right? Like, we always get to say that's not for you. So, you didn't get whatever super in-depth joke about, that comics readers will. So, the reviews didn't really put me off it as much as just, the trailers did, I guess. Like, we knew what we were getting. Like Dave said, you can't spoil this movie. You know what you're getting. It set the table very plainly. And I just, no. I love me some bats, but no.
And despite that critical reaction, the box office for this thing was bonkers. It was bonkers. And I think this is like the negative reinforcement that, like, it would be like giving your dog a treat when it pisses on the floor, right?
Yep.
That's what's happening with Warner Brothers right now. That's exactly what happened with Man of Steel. They got the negative reinforcement of this movie is going to make $1 billion. Now they're just going to say, you know what? Let's let Zack Snyder direct more movies. Let's stay on this path of letting him direct Justice League 1 and 2, which should be fun, but probably won't because he's the guy.
Right.
That's the biggest problem that I have with the whole thing, is that despite the fact that this movie was almost universally panned by comics readers and critics, like regular art house critics, it's not going to change one thing about the DC extended universe. It's not going to change anything because they made all the money. There was I think I read this week, a 67% drop off from week 1 to week 2 for Man of Steel. And maybe if they see that same sort of thing, and it stays significantly worse, maybe they'll take that as a hint, and they'll at least have Zack Snyder try to do something different. Not that he would be able to to achieve that, but he's kind of like the Kevin Feige or the Joss Whedon of this universe now, and that's not a fun thing.
No,
because he doesn't make a fun movie. It's not. I don't think it's in his DNA. And I don't want to make this like piss on Zack Snyder Day, because there are a couple of Zack Snyder movies that I like. There are a couple I like. Like I like 300 and I like the Watchmen adaptation. I don't hate those.
Same.
But I didn't have the same connection to those things prior to that I have to the Batman, right?
Yeah, this to me is another Watchmen, where I don't know that anyone, well, no, someone could have made a good Watchmen movie. It wasn't Zack Snyder, though. So I guess it's the same thing approaching this, where it's like, this is another property I love, so I just kind of knew after watching what he did with Watchmen, I was like, okay, I know exactly what to expect.
I don't hate the Watchmen movie only because if you're going to make a movie as dour and dark and bleak as Zack Snyder makes movies, Watchmen is the one property where that really kind of fits the tone of the source material.
No, that's fair.
And he didn't really he didn't ruin the source material of Watchmen.
No,
in an egregious manner. It was just he took a couple liberties that.
Yeah. No, that movie is fine, right? It's fine.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah, I don't have that visceral reaction where it's like, I want to set him on fire or anything. I don't like his movies. I don't like any of his movies.
Yeah.
But that also means that we're going to talk about more in the setup, looking ahead to I know I don't like Suicide Squad. Not that I really need to know Zack Snyder doing it, but I know I don't like that. And now that makes me worried for Wonder Woman and Justice League and I think he's attached to Flash and Aquaman too. So
I think he's attached as like a producer in name only on Flash and Aquaman.
Let's hope.
But I can't imagine that they're not having him, set up the connections between the movies.
Well,
right?
He set the tone, right? Like, this is going to be the springboard.
Yeah. I read a review this week that was kind of like a Q&A, kind of spoilery FAQ for this, and they said that they described it as the newest chapter in director Zack Snyder's DC cinematic murderverse.
Yeah. I saw that.
And Zack Snyder really didn't do himself any favors because, spoilers, there are a couple of collateral damage murder moments in this movie, and that's what I mean when I talk about doubling down on what you got wrong the last time that people criticized you for. Is he came out and he was like, listen, it's not murder so much as it's like manslaughter. And you're like, dude, fuck you. You don't understand. You do not understand what's happening.
You're not listening.
He's clueless,
again.
Yeah.
It's almost like the only comic book he ever read was The Punisher, and he goes, this is comic book. And The Punisher is fine.
This is the cinematic universe I want to play, and it's this one. But since I don't have The Punisher, I'll make everything The Punisher.
Right. And sadly, I kind of feel like a little bit of a hypocrite because I praised Daredevil Season 2 last week, and Daredevil Season 2 was gory as fuck. But again, it's not about gore or no gore. It's about, do you understand the characters or not? And he clearly doesn't, is kind of the gist of it before we move on to talking about the plot in detail and kind of going over some of the Easter eggs, some of which were pretty fun.
And let's be right there for that moment for a second. What is it about Batman and what is it about Superman that Zack Snyder doesn't get? You guys can speak to this more intelligently than I can, but I think what I've continued to hear all the time is the Superman murdering thing just goes so much against his whole philosophy on the greater good and where he elevates humanity and his role in what he provides to Earth, right? And then different with Batman on another level. But go ahead.
But the same argument is to be made. It's just coming from a different lens, basically.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question because the DC heroes are different from the Marvel heroes. Not every superhero is the same, right? There are some that murder people and you don't bat an eye because that's part of the character, like the Punisher, or even, for example, Captain America. In the middle of World War II, he's out shooting a pistol at Nazis. Like, that happens, and we still like Captain America, right? It's not about does the character murder people or not. It's about what are these characters and what do they mean? And the DC universe is so much more pure than the Marvel universe because it came first, right? So you have Superman, you have Batman, whose kind of whole thing is we're gonna try to save everyone, and Superman's gonna do it by trying to be Superman, right? And use all of his powers to the best of his ability to save as many people as possible. Batman is going to do it by being smarter and having a plan. And neither of those things are in this movie. And neither of those things are in Man of Steel.
And I think you hit it exactly. It's both you set character's conviction and then just, respected over the long course of continuity. But DC also has had a really long history of when there is a death, it's a thing. Right?
Yes.
Like you look at something like The Killing Joke or some of these other books where there's
Under the Red Hood.
Where there's just just one or two, and there are these huge complex things that you've got to unpack and figure out how they deal with it, and there's nothing wanton. I think that's maybe the difference is where in Marvel there's collateral damage, and it's all about how that has become the world that they exist in, and so it's normal and okay. And in DC, the world we exist in is one where you have a bunch of people die. That would be a cataclysmic plot twist that would change, everyone who played in the sandbox for, until the next reboot, basically.
Yeah, totally. There are countless examples of that. And I think the other thing that Snyder doesn't get about these characters is that they are both essentially good. They just believe in a different way to find justice, right?
Yes.
And in this movie, Batman's motivation is similar to what Batman's motivation would be in an on-model version of the character. It's, I have to be prepared because he could be the death of us all. Like Superman could be the death of us all, and that is a Batman motivation. But
certainly,
the way that it's manifested is in a way of he killed all my friends in that building that one time, and now I need revenge, as opposed to I need to be prepared for when he goes bad.
Right.
It's almost as if he is actively trying to take him out preemptively, which again gets into like a whole nother like political side of trying to give an analogy or give like a political metaphor to this thing.
Yeah.
In Dark Knight Returns, Batman fights Superman because Superman comes at him, right?
Yes.
And he says, listen, you've given me no other choice because you have let your power become corrupted. So come at me, and I'm going to be the guy who takes you out. Whereas in this movie, his motivation is, I'm going to proactively take out the Superman because one day he could be a problem.
Well, also because I want to punish you for the things you've done.
Correct.
Which is, again, like...
Correct.
That's the thing that I'm struggling to even express like the weight of this. Like, Batman could have killed the Joker thousands of times,
yes.
tens of thousands of times now, and won't,
yes.
refuses to. So the idea that like suddenly Superman can like irk him into, I'm going to attack another hero, is just like it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the universe at all. And I think that's what. Back to Brent's original question, that's why it's so frustrating, because it's so tone deaf to the universe. That's why the Marvel movies have been so good, is because they've tried to incorporate as much of that tonality as they can, whereas this whole DC movement just feels very tone deaf to a lot of the continuity. It feels like they're just kind of playing catch up to Marvel.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the last thing I'll say about the fight scene, the Batman v Superman fight, which is kind of the headliner of this movie, is that, and I touched on this a little bit last week, is that it doesn't feel like they earned it, because Dark Knight Returns is the shining example of what superhero comics can be. You point it out to people and say, this is what hefty superhero comics are like. This is what high-minded comic books, where you're grappling with, when you take these characters to their extremes, what happens, and you try to tell the last Batman story, what happens. They earned it after 50 years of continuity, whereas this movie tried to jump right to that, and they got some of the imagery right, which is what Snyder always does. He gets the imagery right, but like you said, it's kind of tone deaf to the meaning behind it.
So I know you were kind of ready to move on, but just one question that I'll ask, if I may.
Yeah.
This is canon, correct? Like, the Batman versus Superman thing happened in the Batman or in the DC universe, correct?
It's happened a number of times. Batman and Superman have fought a number of times.
Yeah. And it works in the comics, obviously, because there's entire storylines that kind of culminate in this moment.
Yeah.
But the storyline, seemingly, Dave, in this one didn't, because they got Superman wrong, right? Like, that's
Yeah, I think
that's
you're
kind
right.
of the catalyst, isn't it?
You're right. I think for me, the biggest thing is Superman is supposed to be a positive, optimistic, I can solve anything type of hero that sometimes can get corrupted or sometimes can lose his way because he's trying to do more than he can. But it's always that sort of a fault that brings down Superman. It's never a fault where he looks at Batman and says he is wrong and I need to take him down.
No.
And that's kind of what the motivation is in this, where Clark Kent himself determines the Bat Vigilante is bad and I need to do something about it. Superman never really deputizes himself as the arbiter of right and wrong. He is mainly the I think
what you're saying in summary, it's two things, right? It's they get the tone wrong, and so it just feels off, like you're watching it with like the color adjusted wrong on your television or something.
Totally.
And then in the comics, the fight has come from two places that you can understand each perspective from.
Yeah.
And from everything I've seen in this movie, that doesn't, because in the comics you're going, it's kind of like Civil War, right? Like okay, I can see both sides of this issue, and I understand these heroes come together in this. It just kind of feels haphazard. Like, hey,
Totally.
We got two tentpole figures, let's make them punch each other.
Absolutely. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take our first break? You mentioned just there haphazard. The way that they set this up is kind of haphazard. So I kind of want to take our break, get into full spoilers. I'll talk to you guys about the different plot threads that they try to tie together to get us there, and we'll kind of go from there. So with that, we'll take our first break, go to commercial, and we'll be right back.
Today's show is brought to you by Amazon. Go to popnerdery.com/Amazon, shop as you normally would, get the same Amazon you know and love, while you get to support Pop Nerdery.
So, Toph, next time you recommend a giant coffee table book about the Coen brothers, I can go to popnerdery.com/Amazon?
And buy 2 copies. Pop Nerdery is part of the Amazon Associates program. It means you get the same selection and low prices of Amazon you know and love. If you're a Prime member, you get the exact same 2-day shipping that you already compulsively buy things when you're shopping, and you support Pop Nerdery. That's it. This is simple.
Click. Oh, sorry, Toph. I was already bookmarking popnerdery.com/Amazon.
Dave, you did something right then. But bookmark popnerdery.com/Amazon your favorite browser today. And remember, every time you're going to Amazon to compulsively buy things, popnerdery.com/Amazon.
And we're back to the spoiler-full section of the podcast. Dave, again, is the only one that has seen the movie, so he's going to do a lot of the talking, but Toph and I definitely have questions, and we are going to let Dave tell us what he thinks we need to know. Full spoilers. We're going to talk about the plot. We're going to talk about Easter eggs that he found interesting and spotted right away, or has found online that exist. Talk about some likes and dislikes, as well as what might be happening next if they decide, based off all the gobs of money they're making off a bad movie, that they should make more movies, hopefully that aren't bad. Where will the story go? So we are going to dive right in. I know Dave has lots of notes, so why don't you just take us where you want us to go, buddy?
Absolutely. So the biggest complaint that I had, I mentioned this in the A segment, is that there's about 90 minutes of good movie buried under 2.5 hours of Snyder. So what I meant by that was the first hour of the movie was trying to give us a justification for why these two characters would fight, right? Because otherwise you have, grandmas all across the country asking why these two good guys are punching each other.
Which I have had in my actual day-to-day life.
Why are they fighting?
Yes.
And why isn't it Law and Order? Because it has the V, not the VS.
Doink, doink.
Exactly. So what I mean when I say that the whole first half of the movie was kind of all over the place is that they did a couple of things. Because they're trying to set the table for Justice League, they had to have both characters, both of their supporting casts, and all of the additional characters start to get introduced and give them something to do in the beginning part of this movie. So the beginning of this movie is like 4 to 5 minute long scenes where you get like a dour entry to the scene, and then something happens, and then they cut away quickly to a different scene that's happening in a different place. So by that I mean, at the very beginning you open up with Lois Lane is in a desert with some warlords, and then that scene happens for a little while and they cut away. And then you're with Bruce Wayne, who's, flashing back toward the Man of Steel third act where Wayne Financial is getting blown up. Then you cut back to present day with Lois Lane in this desert again, with these people. Then you cut over to Holly Hunter's senator character, and she's doing a thing where she's talking to Lex Luthor, or she's making a speech on TV. And then you cut again, and he's intertwining all of these scenes to give all of these actors and all of these characters something to do, when it would have been a much more efficient and enjoyable way to do it if you had cut out some of these characters, right? Because it's technically a Man of Steel sequel, or at least it started out that way, you have Lois Lane and you have Perry White and you have a Jimmy Olsen cameo that ends very quickly, which I'll get to in a minute. You have Lois Lane trying to do Lois Lane things. You have Clark and Lois doing romantic things. You have all of that stuff that would have been Man of Steel stuff.
Gosh.
Then you have all the Batman stuff where you're starting to see, Batman is catching criminals, and they're setting up that he's kind of a mythical figure in Gotham, that he's been operating for 20 years but is still, not in the daylight, and nobody really knows for sure if he exists after 20 years. And the cops are, I haven't seen him, but, Rook, you'll blah, blah, blah. You'll see him one day. I've had many encounters with the Bat, and then they're both terrified. So, you're setting up both of those things, and then to tie them together, you have this Holly Hunter, Senator, and Lex Luthor storyline that's like the through line, the middle part. And you're flashing between all of these characters for what seems like the first, solid first half hour of this movie. So I had gone, because I had read the reviews, I had gone with Carl to a bar prior to this and had myself a couple of tall lagers. And I had to hit the head pretty early on in this thing, and
PopNerdery Podcast brought to you by booze.
Exactly. So I left during one of these Holly Hunter scenes, came back, and I turned to Carl and I said, "Hey, did I miss anything?" And he goes, "No, it was the same. They flashed to 3 other scenes while you were gone, but it's the same shit we've been seeing this whole time." So, and kind of he did the same thing. So, the whole beginning part of this movie is, dying under the weight of trying to set it up. Because they're trying to cram too much into the movie. Like I said before, I didn't really hate any of the performances. It's just that the way that the script was written to try to make all of this happen, none of it was really satisfying. So because you get these short little bursts, if they make a mistake inside of there, and by make a mistake I mean if one of the characters does something that's off model, you don't get to wipe it away by seeing them do something that's bad, something that's good. You have to flip to something else. So one of these things is there's this storyline at the beginning where Batman has taken it up a notch, where now he is branding his people that he catches before they go to jail.
Off.
And I know this is terrible. So this isn't Affleck's fault. This is in the script.
No.
But he's branding the characters with a bat symbol, and then when they go to jail, they're being assaulted. They're calling it a mark of death. So now they're calling Batman the judge, jury, and executioner, and this is what kind of turns Clark against the Bat vigilante, which is so not something that Batman would do. No. There's no way in a million years in the comic books that Batman is branding his victims unless it's some sort of Elseworlds whatever. So it's if they would have had that part and then gone on to show me more in different Batman things that Batman does, maybe I forget about that quicker. But because they show you that thing and then they leap to something else, it's all I can think about for the next 5 minutes is, wow, they really fucked up that thing about Batman.
Speaking of fucking up tonality at all points, Batman won't fucking brand his victims. Just stop it.
No.
Calling them victims that's
yes.
Yeah, weird. Yeah.
Yeah, and in no instance of Batman do you find the criminals are sympathetic. Right.
Right.
You're not really sympathetic for the criminals because Batman draws a line and he catches bad guys. He catches the worst of the worst, right? He catches pedophiles and child molesters and mobsters and murderers. That's what Batman does. He doesn't, worry himself
the
with
most good with the least effort.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the scene in the 1989 Tim Burton Batman where you see Batman catch some thugs in the street, and he fucks with them, and he messes with them hard. Right. But it's all about him then letting those guys go so that they can go tell their friends.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, fucking Batman.
I think we're talking about where he dangles them off the edge of a roof.
Yes.
Particularly, that's Batman's really fucking with him. He dangled that guy for a little while.
Yeah, and that's what happened throughout the Dark Knight trilogy too, Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, where we said, maybe they got this wrong or that wrong, and maybe Dark Knight Rises sucked. But in the first two movies, they got the tone of the character right. Maybe he had a terrible bad voice. But,
where's Harvey Dent? What do you mean he had a bad voice?
Yeah, but they got the tone of the character right. So that's what I mean when I say there was 90 minutes of a good movie trapped inside this 2.5-hour movie.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that I think this first hour really, really kind of kills it. There's a lot of mischaracterization in that first hour, and it's so disjointed that it hurts the overall plot of the film.
So my first just kind of interjectory question, and I know we probably want to save most of the Q&A for rapid fire, but would this movie have worked better if there had been a solo Affleck film prior to this film coming out that could have dovetailed with Man of Steel and set a stage for the Affleck Batman character that much more in cement, so that you can break into all right, that's the world of Batman, that's the world of Superman.
Yeah.
This is why they're colliding.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think the answer is yes, and I think I'm going to tell you a reason why that's maybe not what you're thinking about.
Okay.
One, I do think that it would have eliminated some of this stilted back and forth storytelling that I'm talking about, because based on what you're saying, it gives them more time to flesh out that character before this impact happens. But the other thing is, I think the rumor right now is that Affleck is going to be directing this solo Batman movie that is kind of out there in the ether. Mm-hmm. And Affleck would be able to choose his writer, and right now they're talking about he is collaborating with Jeff Johns, who's a comic book guy. I think that if there was a solo Batman movie with Affleck and Johns and an Affleck chosen writer at the helm, we might have gotten a really good characterization of Batman that Snyder would have had to follow. So I think that Snyder would have had a blueprint for what this character is supposed to be like, because based on what's happened here, it looks like he stole a couple of panels from Dark Knight Returns but has not really read a comic book, which is kind of tough. And it might be a Goyer problem, because Goyer wrote the majority of the bones of this thing before it got rewritten by Chris Terrio. But yeah, I do think I agree with that. That it might have been a little bit better had they taken the time to flesh out this version of the Bat.
And I mean, you can always second guess this stuff. Hindsight's 20/20, right? But it just sounds like, based on the pacing of the plot, and we can debate the merits of having to retell an origin story and set the tone of vigilante and who Alfred is and all this stuff that I feel like moviegoers don't need. But I'm just wondering if that that creates that kind of gap.
We did spend time at the beginning of this movie doing a Batman origin story again. You did see Mark of Zorro, you did see the Alley, you did see Pearls, you did see Joe Chill. All of that shit happened. And again, you're right. That didn't need to happen. And it was flashed back to multiple times during the movie to talk about Batman's motivation. If you have been alive in the last 30 years, 20 years, you know what Batman's motivation is. You understand why he's doing it. And also, I think that constantly flashing back to the Pearls does a disservice to this character, because it makes it look like he has no other motivation than my parents got killed and I'm still whining about it.
He could never possibly have grown into the role. Instead, he's always just going to be well, it's the only thing. This is the only reason he's doing it. We all know that. Well,
because he's an emotionally jilted 12-year-old still.
Right.
Yeah. So there is that. I definitely agree with that. So we get past this kind of stilted opening plot where they're flashing between these different things, and you get essentially all the beats that were in the trailer. You get the party at Lex Luthor's house, where Affleck is good, and if there's a little bit of detective there, I think that he's a little bit more James Bond than Sherlock Holmes. So he's a little bit more spy than detective, where he's got his cool car, he's talking to girls, he's using tech in order to steal secrets, like James Bond would do, as opposed to necessarily deducing anything. So I'm hoping in like a solo Batman movie, they make him a tad bit more detective than spy. But you get that scene, then they jump you forward. Essentially right after that is when you start getting some of the Lex Luthor scheming to get, his doomsday. So Lex Luthor is scheming with Congress to get that. At one point, Lex Luthor uses this kind of superfluous victim of the Man of Steel attacks to get sympathy in Congress, and then promptly blows up the Capitol with Superman inside of it.
Dear God.
Yeah. So that's like the tipping point for Batman, and like Superman, the Capitol explodes with Superman inside of it, and you get this like great quote unquote imagery of like the Capitol in flames around Superman, and he just looks like serious and
stoic,
scowly.
And dark,
right?
Scowly and dark and dark
and dark, and in that situation, if you're getting this character right, Superman is distraught, and he wonders why he couldn't have saved everybody, and whatever. In this, it's more just like he's the fucking guy who twists people's neck off at the end of Man of Steel. So that happens, and that is kind of like the moment where the world kind of turns on Superman a little bit, and Bruce has his justification to implement his plan. Bruce has stolen the kryptonite from Lex Luthor, but you don't get to see that. So again, Batman is a detective. You don't get to see him figuring out how Lex has the kryptonite. You don't get to see him figuring out how to get in and out. You don't get to see him steal the kryptonite. You don't get to see him really like determine or like figure out how to turn that kryptonite into his super suit, to be able to defeat the Man of Steel. So they just kind of skip over the stuff that I, as a Batman fan, would have liked to see, because they didn't really have time, because this movie is chock full of nonsense
stuff.
So before you get the next thing is the Batman Superman fight. So that's the main thing. Before we get to that, I just want to take a second to talk about Affleck as Batman and let you guys kind of ask me some questions, because last week I did say the best worst case scenario for me is that they get everything wrong, but they still don't ruin Batman. And I think that they mostly get there. There's a lot of good. I think the look, so the Bruce Wayne look
is
Alfred, the Alfred look, the Batcave look, the Batmobile look, the costume, the main Batman costume, as well as the Dark Knight Returns like metal costume, the bat signal, the look of Gotham itself, all of that is good. All of the imagery, all that looks great. Affleck, I think, makes a really good Batman. He's a tad more angry than I'd like, but to be fair, Batman was pretty angry in Dark Knight Returns. If you're reading that as what's on the paper, he's pretty angry there. I thought, even though he was a little bit more spy than detective, the strategy that he kind of employs in the movie felt like Batman. How he utilized Alfred and how much Alfred cared for him as like a father figure type came through in the movie in a big way. So that felt really good. And I also felt like he was really good as Bruce Wayne. He came off as an older Bruce Wayne, someone who's just a little bit kind of fed up with it, fed up with having to put on this socialite mask, fed up with people criticizing the Batman, fed up with, putting in blood, sweat, and tears over 20 years, and this is still what the world is like.
He's earned a somewhat of a sick of this shit attitude.
Exactly. So all that stuff was really good. Couple of bad things. We already talked about the Bat branding, which is not good. and Batman would never do that. The other thing is there are a couple of collateral damage murders in this movie from the Batman, where there's a really nice chase scene, a Batmobile chase scene, where he's chasing down some of like Lex Luthor's goons, one of whom is KG Beast from the comics, if you're a big comic nerd like I am. And he doesn't murder anyone, right? He doesn't shoot a guy. He doesn't like snap a guy's neck. None of that stuff actually happens in real world Gotham. But like he will shoot out your tires and gas tank and make your car explode. And if you happen to die, so be it. Or he will kind of crash his Batcopter or his Batmobile into your truck. And if your truck rolls and you're in there, he's not going to check to make sure you're okay. He's just going to get what he needs to do done and roll on. And that's not explicitly Batman killing people, but it's to the letter of the law, but not to the spirit of the law. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, it's the tone. Is what we keep coming back to. Like, fine, you don't have someone snapping his neck, but you're fucking with this thin gray line here that you're dicking across. Like, that's just not.
And it felt like had this movie come out first, like prior to Man of Steel, and all of that criticism not happened, like maybe I probably could have gotten past it. Because there are a couple of times in Dark Knight where you're watching him shoot at things with the bat cycle or whatever, and you're like, ugh, maybe that was a little too close, or But it did happen after Man of Steel, and it did happen after all that criticism, that off-model criticism happened. And it was like they said, you know what, fuck you, we're going to do it with Batman 2.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel egregious, but it felt like you're getting way too close and you're almost sticking up your middle finger at me.
Very on purpose, yeah.
Exactly. And then the worst part of the whole thing, of the whole first half of the movie, was very Batman-centric. And if you guys remember from the trailers, there was that Nightmare Batman, where he was in his desert costume,
right? And
you saw the Darkseid symbol, and Superman had soldiers, right? Like, why the fuck does Superman need soldiers? And in the movie, the way it's played off is as like a Batman fever dream. It's like this Batman nightmare where Bruce is imagining the worst that the world could get, right? Mm-hmm. And inside of that, he is snapping people's necks and shooting people with guns and like totally being un-Batman. And I don't understand why that stuff was necessary. In the same way, when you watch Man of Steel, there's that black-suited I'm drowning in skulls scene that Superman has, this like fever dream of like what's the worst thing that could happen. And the only reason that I can think of that it's in there is somebody was storyboarding or somebody was kicking around ideas, and Zack Snyder goes, damn, that would look badass, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be cool?
Right.
Let's do it.
Wouldn't that be metal? Like, wouldn't that be awesome? Go like, man.
Just imagine Batman running around snapping fucking necks, though. Come on. That's awesome.
Right. And that's the only reason why I can think that it's in there. If they took out all that stuff, I think the movie gets 10% better just in that aspect. Wow. And they kind of played it off as, and this is where the first big Easter egg comes in, they kind of played it off as this might actually be an alternate future and not just like a nightmare fever dream, because after this happens, after this nightmare scene happens, this is where we get our Flash cameo, where you see what is kind of like a fever dream of the Flash, where he is like leaning out of the Speed Force, kind of obscured, and he's yelling at Bruce, and he's saying, Bruce, you were right. Find Lois, she's the key. And then is gone. So they're kind of playing it off as like you have to bring us together to stop this thing that you just saw from happening. Right, where in no fucking future is Batman snapping people's necks and shooting people with guns. No. In no fucking way is that happening.
I hope not. Yeah.
No.
So that's where those are the good and the bad of Affleck as Batman. I do think that the way that they handled the Dead Robin suit and the way that he talks about his 20 years in Gotham sets up a really great opportunity for like a prequel movie where these movies are all set prior to Batman v Superman, so you can fuck around in a world that is pure That's happened
I'll take
before
that.
Man of Steel, and it's happened before Batman v Superman, which is nice. I honestly think, and we'll talk about this when we talk about what's next, I honestly think we're going to get Under the Red Hood as our first Batman solo movie, which I would be jacked up for. I would be so happy if that happened. So the next big thing to talk about is the Batman v Superman fight, because it is kind of the big action piece in this movie. In my opinion, I think it works. I don't know if the motivations leading up to or the aftermath at the end of it work, but the actual fight where you see these two going at it on screen, I think it works for the most part. The only thing that I think doesn't is they're a little over-reliant on Bruce's suit. So Bruce's suit is like the trump card because he is just as strong as Superman. Not just as strong, but he's strong enough to fight Superman, and Superman can't do some of the things he would normally do because Bruce has this suit. And I would have liked to see a little bit more of a puzzle, kind of like you know how when you played Legend of Zelda when you were a kid, there were puzzles that you had to solve in order to beat a guy instead of just like pummeling him extra.
Yeah, just stab.
Right. I wish there was more of a puzzle for Bruce to solve. It was very Dark Knight Returns-esque, so they gave you the kryptonite poison arrow in a way. You didn't see Green Arrow, but you got the kryptonite poison arrow. You got the big Batman kick to the face. You got Batman making Superman bleed, which was kind of cool. But I did think that it looked cool, but it didn't have any of the weight of the Dark Knight Returns version. Because the Dark Knight Returns version wasn't about Batman being physically superior. It was about Batman outsmarting Superman. And I don't think that necessarily happened in this one.
Because there were no puzzles.
Right. And what causes them to stop fighting, and this is probably the biggest spoiler of the whole movie, but what causes them to stop fighting is that Lex has captured Clark Kent's mom. Clark Kent's mom's name is Martha. So Clark is saying to Bruce, you need to save Martha. And this is the biggest, hey, these comics were written in the 1930s coincidence ever. But both of their mothers are named Martha. Martha Wayne and Martha Kent. And that's kind of like the big aha moment of like, why did you say that name? Kind of thing. So they don't stop because
our mom's got the same names. Let's be best friends.
Yeah. So it's not really great.
Oh man.
When that happens, you do kind of see the hero in Bruce come out where he feels like he's kind of proved his point, but you don't get the line. You don't get the like, Clark, remember it was me that beat you. This happened once, it can happen again. I'm going to go be a hero now, but you fucking remember this forever. Like, he doesn't say shit like that, which is what I really wanted to, like, drive it home and end it. So that's how it ends. And I don't think it's a really great way to end that fight. It's a good way to get him to stop fighting, I guess.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really great. The badass Batman fight scene where he's clearing that building that you saw in the final trailer, that was him going to save Clark Kent's mom, which is great because that's something Batman would totally do, and it was the best characterization and the most badass Batman that we've ever seen on screen. It felt somewhat similar to Dark Knight where he's taking out the SWAT team, but they were criminals, so he didn't have to be gentle. I'll put it lightly. And Snyder didn't go too far. I think there was a lot of violence there, but it wasn't anything outside of what you would expect Batman to do.
So I definitely have a couple questions, and you've kind of already almost touched on some of this stuff, but like you talked about Affleck's Batman, and you talked about Affleck's Bruce Wayne, but I'd love to hear you actually compare them to the versions we've already seen on screen. So, like, if you had to rank, and let's just throw out Clooney and Kilmer, if we are just comparing maybe Affleck, Bale, and Keaton, who's Batman 1, 2, 3, and then who's Bruce Wayne 1, 2, 3?
Okay. I think that they're different Batmans, but if I had to rank which one I want to see in a Batman solo movie, I think I would rank Affleck at the top.
Wow.
I think that this was the closest to my Batman, I guess,
Cool.
as I've ever seen. And some of that is imagery, right? Some of that is the costume is as close as it's ever been. Some of that is you saw panels from Dark Knight Returns, which is that'll tug on my nerd heartstrings. But I do think that he was the closest version to the actual Batman. Now,
okay. How about Bruce Wayne?
I think that.
Or did you not see enough, maybe?
I mean, I think you saw enough to judge. I think that maybe Keaton was the best Bruce Wayne. I liked Keaton's Bruce Wayne in that he was a little bit more measured, I guess. He wasn't as much of a like putting on the Playboy act as Bale was, and Affleck's Bruce Wayne was so very dark and dour that you can't really compare the two. I think that the Bruce Wayne in the newest New 52 books is not just like a Playboy. He's a guy who is purposefully trying to make Gotham a better place by day, while Batman physically does it by night. And I think Keaton gets the closest to that, which is my favorite version of Bruce Wayne.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious.
No,
we all know Keaton's the best. That was a superfluous question. Everyone knows that Keaton is the best Batman.
Yeah, I don't think Bale's a good Batman, but I think Bale had the best Batman movies. That his were the best plot.
Yes.
Why?
Right. But the actual character, that's what I was asking.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I think Bale's a great actor, and he just wasn't a great Batman.
He made a horrific choice on a Batman voice. That's really the thing I don't like about those movies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. Do you guys have any other questions before I kind of go through the third act and how they wrap this whole thing up?
Well, yes, I will have a question about that part. So,
okay.
The Robin piece, did that seem forced or did it seem appropriate?
You see exactly as much of the Robin piece in the movie as you see in the trailer.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, they put it in the trailer and there's no more of it. I was kind of hoping that they would at least tell us which Robin it was, whether they're going to stay comic accurate and have it be Jason Todd, or if they're going to go off book and do something totally weird because they don't want to introduce multiple Robins because they think people will be confused. I think
in a Snyder film, no,
right, over dumb it down and ruin Dick Grayson. That's what I'm really nervous about with that Robin piece. Is that they're going to overly dumb it down and they're going to say that Dick Grayson was Robin and got killed by the Joker and got turned and now he's a bad guy or something horrible because that's a character that I don't want. But he does mention something about how many good guys are left, but I think that's in the trailer too.
I think so.
Yeah. So there's a slight nod to it, but honestly, it's pretty much what's there is there, which was a slight disappointment for me, but good question. Yeah. So the third act of this thing is, again, what you saw in the trailer. Doomsday comes out, and all of a sudden, Wonder Woman is there. They introduced her a couple of times earlier on, and I will say Gal Gadot nailed a mysterious Diana Prince, and she nailed Wonder Woman. They didn't do anything bad, in at least in my eyes, to ruin quote unquote Wonder Woman. I am actually more interested in a Wonder Woman solo film now than I was prior to seeing the movie, which is good. So she shows up. Superman and Batman are friends now because Batman saved Superman's mom because they have the same name, and and they are. I forgot to mention earlier, Batman had a kryptonite spear, and that was the weapon that they were teasing in some of those images. He had a kryptonite spear that he fashioned from the kryptonite that he stole from Lex Luthor, and when he decided not to murder Superman with it, he kind of threw it away, and it like clinked down to the bottom of like a small pond, right?
So there's a kryptonite pond now. There's a
kryptonite spear someplace, but it's not where they are while they're fighting Doomsday. Doomsday gets popped a couple times by Wonder Woman, which is super impressive looking. She is every bit the warrior that you want her to be. She totally holds her own. Actually, does better against Doomsday than either Superman or Batman, frankly. Not that you'd expect Batman to be able to do much. But they can't beat him. There's a really cool kind of team moment. Not as cool as that one long tracking shot in Avengers where you see all the Avengers doing cool stuff. But almost as good. You have Wonder Woman lassoing Doomsday while Batman does something with his kryptonite cloud gun. That's what that gun was in the trailer. It was like a little grenade launcher that shot like kryptonite dust pellets. So it wasn't an actual gun.
Wow.
It was to replace the Ollie of it all from Dark Knight Returns. And then Superman, with Lois Lane's help, grabs the kryptonite spear, weakens himself by carrying it, and flies in and stabs Doomsday. So Doomsday, that's how Doomsday dies. At the same time, Doomsday grows like a Abomination from the Hulk movie is pretty much who Doomsday is. He grows out like a little claw spear thing, and he stabs Superman in the chest with it. Which is, if you have never read Death of Superman in the comics, that's what happens. Superman dies when he fights Doomsday. So at the end of this movie, Superman dies. They give you the death of Superman in the sequel to Man of Steel. So
I did not see that coming, but okay.
Yeah. So when this happens, you get kind of the emotional, people kind of realize what they had in Superman. They're sad that he's dead, but you don't really get like full-on redemption for Superman because he doesn't really get to speak. So again, in this movie, I don't hate Henry Cavill. I think Henry Cavill is a fine Superman. They just don't give him anything to do. They don't let him smile one time in the whole fucking movie. When he has the suit on, he gets to crack a couple jokes as Clark Kent, but even then, like, he's glowering and he's scowling and he's angry at the Batman.
Superman's not a scowling guy. He's a proud, like, guy looking off to the horizon or smiling at the people because he's just saved them, right?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. So you kind of get
weird.
The way the movie kind of wraps up is you have the Superman coffins, the dual coffins, where he's fake buried in Metropolis and for real buried in Smallville. Clark is buried in Smallville. The story is that Clark died, that day as well.
So that Lois stays confused.
Well, Lois knows he's Superman at this point. Lois and him are openly, dating and stuff. And then at the end, you see Bruce and Diana at the funeral, and in kind of a reverse from Dark Knight Returns, you hear Superman's heart beating in the coffin, as opposed to Superman hearing Bruce's heart beating in the coffin, which I thought was kind of a nice little touch. It kind of they stole it and they didn't really earn it, but I thought as a guy who read that comic book, I thought it was kind of that they kind of added it in. So at the end of this movie, there is no after credits sequence. There's no mid credit sequence. There's no nothing. They don't tag it at all.
I'm kind of glad.
At the very end, they do give you a little bit of talk between Bruce and Diana about bringing the metahumans together, and that's the term they're using is the term from the Flash TV series is metahumans. They've been using that term a lot in the New 52 also is metahumans.
Yeah.
So they're talking about bringing them together. So you get your little tease at Justice. There were other teases in the Easter eggs, but that's kind of the overall plot of the movie. So reactions, questions.
Well, I didn't hear you talk about Doomsday a whole lot. I think we can assume Zod somehow is revitalized and becomes Doomsday or something, right?
Yeah. Yes. So the Doomsday, Luthor, Zod love triangle that happens. The way that it works is Lex Luthor, in his dealings with the Senate prior to blowing up the senator to cover his tracks and get people against Superman, he buys himself rights to the the world engine from the end of Man of Steel. Okay. This is very convoluted. He buys himself rights to be able to go to the downed world engine site to be able to scavenge it for Krypton parts, right? So he gets a hold of the little little black Superman symbol USB drive stick looking thing from Man of Steel, which has the genomes of all of the Kryptonians on it. So he gets a hold of that, as well as Zod's body in this deal. And he goes back to the downed site to go to the Kryptonian Genesis chamber or whatever the fuck it is, and he dumps Zod's body and this genome thing and some of his own blood into the Genesis chamber, and they call it like a deformity or a whatever, like an abomination.
Yeah.
And I don't think they actually call it that in the movie, but they should.
Right.
And Doomsday is kind of born from that, from this easy bake oven of a Kryptonian Genesis chamber thing.
Creepy crawlers.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. That's a reference Carl's gonna love. So that's how Zod is born. At the end, you get a little bit of comeuppance for Luthor. Luthor gets sent to prison, and then the Batman goes and visits him in prison. So you get a little bit of like Batman threatening, which is kind of cool. He comes face to face with Luthor for the first time. But then after that, Luthor does some like weird shit, like he's gone crazy somehow, and that's never really been in character for Luthor either. Luthor has always been totally in control, totally understands exactly what he's doing, and he's justifying it by saying, "Listen, I'm just right because he's bad." Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit out of character. But yeah, that's the Doomsday Luthor Genesis chamber love triangle, and where that comes from.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, that was a really good question because I totally forgot about Luthor, which this movie does partway through as well.
Who forgets that he was ever the catalyst for all the other things that happened earlier? Oops.
Exactly. Okay, so we kind of went through the whole plot here. What I want to do is I want to jump to break one more time. We'll take a quick second, and then we'll go to where do we see this going from here. And we'll talk a little bit about the Easter eggs. I'll kind of rapid fire through the Easter eggs that were in this movie. So with that, we're off to our last break.
This episode of the PopNerdery Podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to popnerdery.com/audible and sign up for a free trial. Support the show and get hours of entertainment.
So, Brent, I really like the sound of your voice. Do you read me the audiobooks?
Until I get that 5-year contract that I've been working on with my lawyers from Audible.com, sadly, Dave, no.
You're holding out.
With your Audible free trial, you do get free audiobooks at the number of 2 to start out, and then after the trial ends, you get 1 audiobook a month for $14.95 per month. And then you can also receive 30% off the price of additional audiobook.
That's right. It's the ones you listen to in your car. Audiobooks.
It's a 6-hour reading of the 1995 Toyota Camry. Fix it at home yourself. Shop book.
I want a Haynes manual on audiobook.
The diagrams. All right, so this is a little car, and it looks like it's pretty sad, and some of the tires are flat now.
It's read to you by John Goodman. Yes, that John Goodman.
Oh, shit, I was listening to that.
No, sorry, we were lying. The other John Goodman. So go to popnerdery.com/audible, sign up for your free trial, tell your friends so they can share in the audiobook goodness.
And welcome back. We are going to try and wrap this thing up and give you just a couple of the Easter eggs, and then where do we see kind of this new DC series headed, and hopefully there's some compelling stuff here to get us excited about a possible future in this universe, because otherwise we all are probably just going to cry ourselves to sleep after recording this, because it's been pretty doomy and gloomy and very Davey. So yeah,
Yes.
Thanks for seeing the movie, buddy, and tell us, what Easter eggs did you spot
Yes,
and or read about after the fact?
There were a couple of really small ones, a couple of really good ones. We talked about Robin already, which is great. I'm glad that
Which is nice.
I'm glad that this universe acknowledges that Robin is a character that exists, as opposed to the Dark Knight universe where they just barely casually referenced it. So you do see the Robin suit. Perry White makes a joke about it's not 1938 anymore, pretty early on in the movie, which 1938 is the year of Superman's origin. But it takes on kind of like a shit tone when you realize, like, oh shit, Zack Snyder really is like, hey, it's not 1938 anymore. Fuck you.
That's less of a ha-ha moment and more of a fuck you, I don't care what your backstory is.
Exactly.
Right.
So we saw this in the trailer, but you do see a couple of Darkseid references. Darkseid is going to be, for those that are only familiar with Marvel, Darkseid is the Thanos of the DC universe. He is going to, you see kind of his Omega symbol, you see the parademons, you see, that apocalypse future. He's going to be the villain, I'm almost certain, in the Justice League movie. You do get to see a quick peek, kind of Sam Jackson, Nick Fury-esque peek at the different metahumans. It is a little bit weird because they look like Batman's briefcases from Tower of Babel, but it's actually information that Batman steals from Lex Luthor. So Lex has a little bit more information on these metahumans than Bruce does. So that doesn't feel great, but you do get to see him. You get to see you don't get to see Flash in full costume. You get to see him partially in costume in the thing I talked about earlier, and then you get to see him as Barry Allen on like convenience store footage tape where he like zaps back and forth to stop a guy from getting shot. You get to see underwater footage of Aquaman, which is kind of cool. He has his trident, and he doesn't do anything that
Doesn't kill a guy.
Right, he doesn't do anything that
He
ruins it.
doesn't plant the trident into anyone.
Honestly,
so,
if
win,
there's
I guess.
anyone that would kill a guy, probably it would have been Aquaman, right? Aquaman's the one guy who might kill a guy.
That kind of
He
actually would have been awesome if they just been like, Aquaman is the one, like, he's the Punisher of this universe. Like, he'll just
Right?
fucking go nuts.
He'll kill
Like,
you.
he sees a guy, like, toss, like, an empty can into the ocean off of a boardwalk, and he, like, dolphins out of it and just fucking spears him with the trident and then jumps back in.
Or
No
he
explanation whatsoever.
spears him with a trident, lets loose the one tear for the littering, and then dives back in the ocean. And you do get to see him swim like he has a fucking outboard motor on his ass, which is cool. He just like zips past the camera, and it looks like a missile. And then you get to see
Torpedo?
like a torpedo. Yes, you don't
Ah,
put missiles
nautical
in the water.
reference.
Um,
Sailor you.
You get to see a still image of Wonder Woman from 1918. So she's in costume, and you get to see
Interesting.
more of Wonder Woman. So that's the quick one, and you don't see Cyborg in full costume, like in his full getup, because that would have been very expensive for the CGI budget. But you do get to see Victor and his father in Star Labs, and Victor is kind of like on this bed with like wires hanging out of him and machines beeping and stuff like that. And then you get to see a mother box, which is a fucking deep cut DC reference.
Wow.
So
I don't know what that means.
Mother box is essentially what allows the cyborg to do everything that he can do and stay alive after death. and allows him
Supercomputer,
to open up boom tubes, which is essentially teleporting. So you get to see a mother box.
It's like teleporting, but named worse.
Yes, boom tubes. So you get to see that, which is kind of cool. You do get to see Doomsday and the Death of Superman storyline, kind of. And in the Death of Superman storyline, there is an edgy Superman costume where he's wearing a black suit with a silver S. And you don't see Superman in that suit, so breathe easy. But you do. His coffin is black with a chrome S, which kind of feels like a nod to that.
Yeah.
What else? There is lots of Dark Knight Returns references. A couple of references to the Joker, references about clowns, and we have clowns in our in Gotham, and that doesn't go well. I think that was in the trailer. And then the last one, which I teased at the very beginning of this, is we do see Jimmy Olsen. Very briefly, he is Lois's photographer in this desert scene that she's in, and he almost immediately gets shot in the fucking head and killed. I'm not kidding. Jimmy, they take this character out, put him in this universe, and he immediately gets capped in the fucking skull.
Okay.
Hashtag Snyder things.
Right. I left
and
that
it makes
one
it
till
even
the very
creepier
end.
when we think about the fact that I introduced Toph as the Clark
Yeah,
to
thanks
my
for that.
Jimmy. So
Yeah.
I died, and Toph is someone he hates.
So
Yes.
I'm an asshole and you're dead. So fucking nailed it.
He gets killed by KG Beast, who is in this movie as well. So those are the Easter eggs. Those are the primary ones. I will say that the little peeks at the Justice League was kind of cool. You got to see all of their logos on file folders on Bruce's Bat computer,
That's cool. Yeah.
which is kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, there weren't too many Easter eggs that were like world shattering, or weren't too many Easter eggs where it wasn't the after credits sequence at the end of the first Iron Man where you saw Sam Jackson for the first time and you were like, oh fuck, they're gonna create a whole universe, it's gonna be fucking amazing. There was nothing that was like that, except maybe that they didn't explicitly ruin Robin, I guess, is my positive that I'm gleaming from this, is that there's still a possibility they're going to do that, all of the Gotham characters justice.
And
I think
Flash
that's a perfect
doesn't sound
segue.
Terrible.
Let's hope.
That's a perfect segue to talking about what comes next. So, based on what I've described, what do you guys think is coming next? What do you guys think is the best case scenario and worst case scenario for what comes moving forward?
Toph.
Zack Snyder develops an hereto undiscovered love of dairy farming and retires to Vermont and stops making movies. I mean, like that. I am well known as the curmudgeon on this podcast, but I'm just not excited about the shit he's doing in this universe.
Yeah.
We talked at length in episode 16 about how we were very hopeful that this would springboard 3 separate franchises with Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman. I'm hopeful that Wonder Woman will be cool. It sounds like she was pretty rad. That was something that I was probably maybe most worried about, just in terms of this is a great time for her to get some shine and actually get to do a standalone cool thing. So it sounds like they didn't fuck that prospect up. So I'm gonna go with that. There's my positive takeaway, is that it sounds like Wonder Woman is still viable until Snyder gets there, and then she'll be dark and bad. So
good news is that the Wonder Woman movie is going to come out prior to Justice League, so that means
nice.
We're going to see a non-Suicide Squad, non-Snyder directed installment in this series.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think, and Brent touched on this, and I think it's a great point when he was asking about if Batfleck had a standalone before, would that have helped shape tone? We've discussed at length that I'm a fan of the Flash TV show.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a pretty good basis for that character. So if Snyder doesn't dark, super dark noir what is actually just a very fun superhero thing. I think that's maybe why I like The Flash so much, is it is simply fun. Like, it deals with some, compelling issues and you feel for the characters, but at its heart, it is just fun. It's just a fun superhero thing.
Yeah, and I think that the small peek that you get of the Flash in this is pretty serious in like a Flashpoint kind of way. If you are a comics fan, you probably know what Flashpoint is. If you're not a comics fan, you can actually watch. They made an animated movie called Flashpoint Paradox, which is pretty good, and it's on Netflix right now actually, and it tells you the kind of the backstory behind that. So it did feel very Flashpoint, the Flash cameo in this movie, and maybe my opinion was a little bit colored by my overall feelings on the movie as a whole.
Yeah.
But the little snippet that you see of him in the convenience store surveillance footage, he does seem kind of like edgy, like
damn it,
like Reality Bites kind of edgy.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I have to stop. Brett, as someone who isn't like emotionally invested in these characters to an unhealthy degree that I am, where are you hopeful for the future, or where would you like to see the ultimate win here?
I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of this universe, of certainly the Superman character. I think, like, oddly enough, basically the only exposure I've had to Superman was the Lois and Clark series in the 90s,
which is infinitely better than the Superman that they have in these two movies.
Give me that all day. I'll take small little movies over this.
Frankly, I like that probably more than anything because my prepubescent self was like, "Oh, Terry Hatcher's interesting."
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, Superman can take it or leave it. I don't really care if they get the character right. I don't really care if Superman has always been one of the least compelling characters anyway because he's fucking Superman. He does everything. Kryptonite is not that big of a deal. And it never actually does anything to him. He always figures out a way to muster enough strength to overcome it, and he's not a compelling character because he has no real weaknesses. Superman is that. Batman is not. He's fucking awesome for all the reasons. Even when they pick a bad actor to play Batman or they make a bad Batman movie, you still find a lot of things that you want to see more of. And so if we get a solo Batfleck film, I'm all for it. If it's a prequel, I'm all for it.
That's a great point. I didn't mention that, but I think you're spot on. I'll take more Batfleck.
Yeah, gladly. If it's a prequel like Dave suggested, that'd be a cool way to maybe make this movie make more sense. Like, whether that's been in the plans or not, maybe they should take a step back and say, what if we really fleshed out the Affleck version of Batman in its own film? We don't need to go back and show the pearls again, but maybe we show a little bit more about the grieving of Robin, or you show a little bit more about, being the hero that Gotham actually needed, or stepping away and all that stuff without trying to rehash any of the Nolan plot.
Tired Batman is incredibly compelling, right? Like, we don't need to see Batman figuring his shit out anymore. We've seen that, we've done that, we've kind of explored that opportunity. Tired Batman is just so much more of a compelling.
Yes.
I don't remember what it's like to not be tired anymore, and I just have a 2-year-old. I'm not defending Gotham, so I get it, Batman. I'm fucking tired too, buddy.
And
more compelling.
And like you're talking about, Dave, under the Red Hood type of a storyline.
Yes.
Have something where whether it's established or not, have old Batman and how Batman is more of a moniker than just one person, and I think that stuff actually could work, actually could be interesting as a standalone. Justice League has its fucking work cut out for it to not be Avengers 2.0.
Yeah, and I think the best thing,
worse.
I think the best thing that this universe has going for it is, surprisingly, is that Superman is dead. right at the moment. So that's probably the best thing that this universe has going for it as we move into Justice League, is that we don't have to have Snyder trying to figure out Superman, because he clearly cannot figure it out.
Yeah, two cracks at it. Let it go, buddy.
And maybe Superman dying in this movie can symbolically give us a newer and better and different Superman when he finally comes back. Because he's definitely coming back. He's definitely going to be in Justice League. Maybe the plot of the first Justice League is them figuring out how to bring back Superman because they need him, because Darkseid, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Cool, but Snyder clearly hasn't figured that out. And I do think that when you talk about what's the best thing that could come from it, I do think it is Batman solo films. And I do think, for me, it's prequel, because then in my own head, even if Snyder continues to fuck up Justice League, those Batman films can be unmarred by that, because they happened prior to.
And
Affleck
you can do them. You can do as many as you want preceding Justice League stuff.
Right. And
that might be the time we actually get like the Gotham Central movie then.
Exactly. And Affleck is old enough to play old weathered Batman. He's also young enough to play like a Batman that has his shit figured out. He's not young enough to play year one Batman, so that's probably good news for us, because I don't need to see year one Batman again.
Nope.
So I think best case scenario for me is, first and foremost, they don't fuck up Suicide Squad too badly. I'm not optimistic, but
I think that ship might have sailed.
Yeah, but maybe it's not terrible, right? This movie, I would say, is like a hard C-, Batman v Superman. Maybe like probably a C- is where I would go.
So you think this is less of a crime than Batman and Robin?
Yes.
Okay.
Batman and Robin might be less of a crime only because they weren't taking it seriously. They were taking it seriously and still fucked it up pretty badly.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
They're hard to. It's less of a crime, in my opinion, than Dark Knight Rises, because I fucking hated that movie. I hated that movie with a red hot passion. It was terrible, and I think this movie is better than Man of Steel. So I would rank it.
A low bar to jump over, but fine. At least you jumped over something.
I would rank the three: Batman, Superman, Dark Knight Rises, Man of Steel. So of these movies I disliked, I think it's the best of those three, which is still not good. But
no. But it's not Elektra. I think that is something that we have kind of lost, like through us shitting on Zack Snyder and this movie and everything else. Like, this isn't Catwoman. It's not Elektra, right? Like, this is still feasible. They just didn't do it great, as opposed to going, there's nothing about it. There's no salvageable piece of this whole thing.
And there are some things, just like with Man of Steel, there are some things, and just like with Dark Knight Rises, where I can selectively choose to ignore some things to hopefully try and like it a little bit better in my head. Like I selectively try to ignore the bat voice from Bale to try to like it better in my head. I selectively try to forget how many buildings fell down at the end of Man of Steel so that I can like the part where he's a little kid running around with a red cape. I like that part. I like that shit.
Right.
Yeah.
This will be, hopefully I can forget about Nightmare Batman. Hopefully I can forget about Collateral Damage Murder Batman, and hopefully I can forget about how many times Henry Cavill scowled at me as Superman. And if I can do that and just remember the part where Batman and Superman are punching each other and Batman has figured it out that he needs, a kryptonite gun and a kryptonite spear and a supersuit, and enjoy James Bond Batman that I got. Hopefully I can remember this somewhat more fondly than I felt right after I walked out of the theater.
I just don't have any hope for the universe. And that's, again, I think I would really actually think I'd prefer to be in Brent's shoes, where at the very least I could maybe, obviously Brent has a lot more of the character history than just like your normal random moviegoer.
Yeah.
But you haven't delved so far into it, like the minutia will bother you. And I think that would make me hate this movie less. I think.
Yeah. If these movies find their own world to live in, and the tone starts working, and the characters live on their own and are interesting, then DC has a place. But I think if they just keep trying to have to reinvent it over and over and over again,
Like every
they
movie.
are going to continue failing, and they just need to stick to CW TV series, and they'll be.
Yeah,
and we can
only even half of
can
those
say
because
goodbye.
Arrow is terrible. Arrow is bad. Arrow has the same problems that everything else that we've just talked about for the past hour and a half has.
Yeah.
It's plagued by the same issue.
And I think to kind of wrap it up, what I would hope for is I would hope that they learn something from the reviews, that they learn something at all, and that they attempt to do it better next time, because it feels like they really doubled down on all the shit I hated from the last one. So
yeah, that would be nice, except that he also got to read the Man of Steel reviews and didn't. So
I know. I'm trying to end on an optimistic tone, but it's difficult to do. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Don't you say, Brent?
Yeah,
We'll see. We'll see.
That's about the perfect summary of the whole thing. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see, gentlemen. I think this is the moment though where we just say, DC, let's try, and we'll see, DC.
We're here.
And gentlemen, we'll look to see you next time in a normal episode where hopefully there's
17.
some optimism and some glorious smiles and positivity coming at you. Thanks for bearing with us, listeners, and we'll check you out next time. Banger guns.
Banger guns.